Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, thank you for joining our webinar, Successful Partnerships to Strengthen Summer Meals Programming. A couple of housekeeping items first. If you're having any problems with audio connection, go ahead and send those questions via the question box in the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll also be answering questions at the end of the webinar, but please go ahead and chat those in the question box as well throughout the webinar. There's a lot of you on the phone today, so if we don't get to all of the questions, we will respond after via email. We'll get a question report after, and we'll be sure to follow up. A recording of this webinar and a copy of the slides will also be sent to you after the webinar, and there will be a follow-up survey. Please take that survey so that we can continue to improve our webinars for you. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Derek.
Thank you very much, Emily. It's great to be with you all today. Thank you for making plans to join us. And I also want to go ahead and thank our featured panelists who you'll be hearing from later on for all the expertise they'll be sharing. On the next slide, you'll see that this is the second in a 6-part series. So we had a webinar in January. We're here today on February 14th, and we'll have monthly webinars through June focused on summer meals and how we can bring food into communities and make summer meals available when school's out of session. We'd like to thank our generous supporter, the Arby's Foundation, for making this series possible. And for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, No Kid Hungry is a national campaign that's working to end childhood hunger by connecting kids to the healthy food they need every day, with a special focus on summer meals, school breakfast, and after-school meals. We provide tools and resources needed to help elected officials and their staff, educators, and community leaders achieve success in fighting childhood hunger. We also provide technical assistance to organizations or agencies working to end hunger in their state or community. And as Emily mentioned, resources from today's event will be available in a follow-up email and also on our website. The best way to locate this and other training opportunities is to visit bestpractices.nokidhungry.org. We especially encourage users to sign up for our monthly What's New newsletter to receive regular updates on new resources, upcoming webinars, partner updates, granting opportunities, and other events of interest directly into your inbox. And this actually came up after I put these slides together, but I would encourage folks to check out about the new test kitchen grants for program innovation that were just announced today. And that was, again, part of our monthly newsletter. So please do sign up. And also new this month, I'd like to point out our updated Mobile Meals Toolkit. For those thinking about starting a mobile program, the toolkit provides a thoughtful set of questions to evaluate community need, as well as organizational capacity to implement this service model in the summertime. For those of you who are already operating mobile programs, the toolkit provides guidance, tips, and best practices to further support your work. And it's also there for folks that are new to this work to be able to understand what some of the key considerations are and the key success factors for mobile meals. The toolkit's divided into 2 sections. The first section provides an overview and preliminary needs assessment for mobile meals, while the second goes into a deep dive of key aspects of program planning and implementation. So please be sure to check that out on our website. I also am happy to announce on behalf of my colleagues the Summer 2019 Youth Ambassador Program. Through the support of the Sodexo Stop Hunger Foundation, Share Our Strength has created a program to involve college-aged youth ambassadors in the fight against childhood hunger. For the Youth Ambassador Program, partners can apply for 2 youth ambassadors to work full-time over 10 weeks to work on summer meals. Ambassadors will receive a stipend paid through Share Our Strength in the amount of $3,000. Partners are encouraged to match the stipend or to include a bonus for youth ambassadors who complete the program. The program will run through the end of May to the beginning of August. And please note that when we say partner, we are actually referring broadly to any school district or community-based organization that shares No Kid Hungry's goal of increasing access to summer meals. And I checked with my colleague who had given me this information, and she confirmed that we anticipate that any organization represented on today's webinar would be welcome to apply for this program. Each partner will need to submit an online application. There's a link here that includes a work plan and a recruitment strategy for the positions. We rely on partners to conduct recruitment at the local level if approved. And the deadline to apply is coming up next week, February 22nd, 2019, so please do check that out. And if you have any questions about the program or the application process, please contact Ria Rahman at rahman@strength.org. And again, her contact information will be on this slide, which will go out to webinar registrants. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our agenda. The goal of our webinar today, as Emily mentioned, we're focused on partnerships. So we want to highlight the importance and explore the mechanics of effective partnerships that enhance summer meals program quality and reach within communities. The first section of the webinar is going to focus on ideas and recommendations for program sponsors who are interested to expand the range of community partners to help improve or expand their programs this summer, summer 2019, in the months ahead. The second section of the webinar is we're going to widen the lens a little bit to focus on partnerships more broadly, linkages between summer meals and other programs and services, such as after-school meals and other programs, and the value of sustained collaboration with different stakeholders over time. I hope you'll take advantage of today's webinar to ask lots of questions of our expert panelists who we're fortunate to have with us today. And I'm happy to note that we actually have a returning panelist from January who's going to help continue some of the conversations that we started last month. Marla Kaplan is the Director of Student Wellness Initiatives for Montgomery County Public Schools. She's been with Montgomery County Public Schools since 1988, has served as an area supervisor as well as the director there. Marla is a registered and licensed dietitian and completed her studies at the University of Maryland in College Park. Marla was recently named the 2017 Outstanding Dietitian of the Year by the Maryland Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Marla's passion has been to creatively think out of the box to support children, school staff, and the community. Recognizing the numbers of students that are impacted by hunger, Ms. Kaplan has been especially passionate in expanding after-school meal programs and summer meal programs accommodating students and their needs. Marla has developed her career to seek to eliminate hunger and also promote health and wellness among all populations, and she's currently a past chair for MANA, Montgomery County's food bank. Today we also have Melissa Moore, Program Director of Food Access with the Family League of Baltimore, Maryland. The Family League mobilizes resources, empowers communities, and builds capacity among organizations to provide children and families with high-quality programs and services that help them reach their full potential. Melissa has been working with federal child nutrition programs for over 7 years, and in her role, she oversees the after-school, summer, and family child care home programs of the Family League. She also serves as the treasurer of the National CACFP Sponsors Association and is chair of the Baltimore Partnership in Childhood Hunger, which she'll be talking about more in today's webinar. So welcome, Marla and Melissa. And we want to note for folks that we will be taking audience questions during today's webinar, as Emily mentioned. So please type in your questions or comments over the course of this webinar. We will be fielding those at certain points, but don't hesitate to go ahead and ask any questions that come to top of mind, and we'll look forward to fielding those. We'll pause for audience Q&A throughout the webinar and look forward to the opportunity to answer your questions. So before we dive in, I want to just quickly give an overview of summer meals for those of you who may be joining us here for the first time. And quickly, we touched on some of this in our webinar in January. I would encourage you, if you're just now joining us, to take the opportunity to go back and listen to the January webinar on program basics. But for those of you who are here today, we just want to highlight there is a huge gap between children who have access to school meals and those who receive meals in the summertime. Nationwide, we know that summer meals are only meeting about 12% of the need faced by children who struggle with hunger in the summer months. At the same time, there's no other source of income or resources that readily support families at this time. And without additional income, we know that tight family budgets are stretched even thinner, leading to painful trade-offs around transportation, healthcare, and other basic needs. And in order to increase program participation in summer meals, these programs require visibility within the community, association with a trusted institution, site locations that are both safe and convenient for children and their families, and co-location with activities and services. And the Summer Food Service Program or the National School Lunch Program Seamless Summer Options are really the programs that we have at our disposal to meet this need in the summertime. I want to provide a few key program details. There's a congregate meal requirement for the programs we'll discuss today. That means that in order to be eligible for federal reimbursement, these federal child nutrition programs, the meals need to be served and consumed on-site in a supervised setting. We know that there is area eligibility criteria for many of the type of open summer meal sites. Those are drop-in sites, and that eligibility is established using school or census tract data, and that for most programs, up to 2 meals a day can be served. The only combination that cannot be served at most sites are lunch and supper. Otherwise, a combination of breakfast, snack, lunch, or supper, up to 2 meals a day can be served. Note that there's no ceiling on the amount of money that's available through the Summer Food Service Program or the Seamless Summer option, or the number of children that can be fed. So long as sites are approved through the administering state agency and meals are served in compliance with federal regulations, the limitations really are identifying where children and families spend their time and surfacing the best ways to reach your target audience with this important program. And so we know that when we're trying to solve those problems, to identify where are kids and how can we reach them, there really is value in partnership. They can help us, as we can see on the slide, reach new heights and achieve success that we might not be able to achieve on their own. While partnerships do take some time to form and can include unexpected detours along the way, which I'm sure we'll hear from our panelists, individuals and organizations that support your mission can bring specific, tangible assets to the table that you may not have on your own. And to identify these stakeholders and figure out who do you need to bring to the table, you want to ask yourself some of the following questions. Who knows what is happening with kids and families in the community? Who has resources to put towards this program? Who needs to be involved in order for community partners, for children and families to see this program as legitimate and trusted? And who can open new doors or unstick any doors that you haven't been able to open to be able to grow and expand and improve your program over time? By identifying and bringing the right group of stakeholders to the table, you can leverage additional resources and achieve greater outcomes in your program than would otherwise be possible on your own. And this is the value of partnership. And these partnerships don't take place in a vacuum. They take place in the context of program planning that we actually had touched on in last month's webinar. And here on this slide, you can see that we have some of the key planning aspects that are involved in winter and spring, such as contacting sites for continued participation, identifying and reaching out to eligible locations for summer meal sites, and getting started with your summer meals application. We know that state agencies have opened up applications, that there will be required trainings coming up, that there are deadlines through April into June to finalize those sponsor applications, and many other logistical steps that need to take place in order for the program to progress. And there are some suggested partners here. And at this point, I'd like to bring in our colleague, Marla Kaplan, our panelist. And Marla, you were with us last month, and it's mid-February now. We're a few weeks down the road from where we were last time. Summer's going to be here before we know it. What are some, looking at these planning tasks and some of these partners, what are some specific tasks that you and your team have on your plate right now as you're planning for summer 2019? What are some things that you're doing now, and what are some other items on your radar that are going to be coming up soon?
Well, while school's in session and summer's a few months away, this is really the time to start gelling this summer program. Right now, it's calm. It's not going to be calm during the summertime, but this is the time to organize as best as you can. So one of the things would have been to already reach out to last year's summer sites. Make sure that they're on board, that they, if they know the dates that they're going to operate, that's great. Get as much information as you can. Certainly get contact information. Also reach out to eligible schools that are eligible this coming summer that may not have been eligible last year, or schools that were eligible last summer, but for whatever reason, construction or for whatever reason, they did not operate. So put the summer meals program kind of, in the front part of their brain. And in some cases, it's a reminder to principals that you're out there and you really want to partner, and that any programs that are going on in their schools would be eligible to serve children meals. As you're reaching out to the sites, as I mentioned, get as much information as you can. So alongside of that, you've already determined your start and end dates, which are in many cases the first day of a day after school ends and the very end before school begins. You need to determine your training dates, because one of the requirements is that every site has to have at least one person that is trained annually. So you're smart to determine your training dates, so as you reach out to sites, or as your team reaches out to sites, you can share what the training dates are and have them pick one, or have them get back to you after they've heard all of the training dates that are available. At the same time, pull your staff together, pull your groups together, talk about any updates, talk about any models, rehash, hopefully at the end of the summer last year, you kind of went through the strengths and the areas for change or improvement. So rehash some of those and get your staff geared up and psyched for the start of summer. That's pretty much what I'd be doing right now. And in terms of the application, get that all together with your all of the information that has to be pulled together for that. And now you're kind of ready to sail into the site providing you with definite information, firming up those training dates. And then for sites that might be closed enrolled, they'll start getting their lists into you so that you can qualify those locations. And so you're really rolling into summer. And the only other thing that I would be starting to do is take a look at your menu, look at last year's menu, what you want to tweak for this coming summer's menu, and maybe look at what you have on hand, what kind of commodities you might be bringing in or have on hand, and what you might want to start looking at purchasing for this coming summer.
That's great, Marla. Thank you so much, and that's a really good overview. And we really want to hone in on partnerships and some of the we want to demonstrate some of the impact that partnerships have had for folks that have tried to leverage, additional community partners to strengthen their programs. And as you're speaking, I hope folks will, if you have a question that comes to mind, please go ahead and put that in, and we'll be able to incorporate that into our discussion with Marla here today. But Marla, we've had several chances to discuss your work on summer meals, both on this webinar and separately. And you had mentioned to me that a number of years back, the level of community collaboration around your program really went up a notch. It went to a different level from where it had been before. And you really saw impact and outcomes from that. Can you talk about how you pulled together community partners to support your program? Who were some of those partners that came to the table, and what was the impact?
Sure. So as much as I'm sure everybody on the call is a champion in serving our children, you can't do it alone. You just can't, because number one, you don't know where the kids that you're missing. You mentioned, Derek, earlier that we're only serving 12% of the needy population. If we knew where those other children were, we'd be serving them. So we can't do it alone. So we need the relationships and the partners to help us identify where these other children are. As you also mentioned, the limitation is knowing where these kids are, because there's no cap on the number of meals that can be served. So we want to grow, but we can't, as I mentioned, we can't do it alone. So bringing a group of people to the table, which is something that we did in my district about 8 years ago, bringing a group of people to the table helps us develop a trustworthy partnership, because the folks sitting around the table are hearing that there's no agenda on our part except for dedication and commitment to serving our kids. And then the folks that are coming to the table, we need to thank that they're going to partner with us, because they're committed to doing whatever they can do to help kids in our neighborhoods. And so some examples of the partnerships that were just unparalleled with information that they could bring to us were the faith-based organizations. These are the organizations that have Bible study, Head Start Pre-K. There's a lot of family involvement. So families could share with us areas in the jurisdiction that they know that there are kids that are being pulled together for activities during the day. One of the most interesting, or two of the most interesting groups that we created was we had a walk-in location at a pediatrician's office. It was an eligible area. There were kids that were coming to the doctors, and as they came to the doctor's office, they were given a meal. When we worked with the housing authorities, not only did we then could provide meals to the housing complexes, but we had rental offices that were willing to step up to the plate and bring the kids to the community room at lunchtime. And so we could deliver meals, and then all of the kids in the building were now being served breakfast and or lunch every day. So what you're looking at right now, what is between 2012 and 2013 was the first time that we brought this work group together. And if you look at the total meals at the bottom, there was a 50% difference in the number of meals that were served between 2012 and 2013. And that was huge. And just for the information to the group on the call, participation has been sustained at that level or higher since 2013. That work group is still in operation, but there's constant communication between members of the work group. There's a constant collaboration between the members of the group at the table as well as those members coming to the food and nutrition services. So there's been a network created that are all working towards the well-being of our students.
That's great, Marla. Thank you. And again, I've got a question here, and then I want to go back out to our audience and answer any questions that may have come through. But Marla, I know there are folks on the line. We got a lot of people on the line today, many of whom are probably looking to replicate or sustain the kind of success you've just described, either it's because it's something that they want to see happen in their communities, or they've had this kind of success. And like yourself, you're saying, you want to make sure that this success is not a one-off, that it continues into the future. What would be your recommendation for folks out there that are listening and taking part in today's webinar who are looking to generate or maintain the same kind of energy and enthusiasm around summer meals among their community partners?
To take a look at if the last webinar we talked about areas of the county that perhaps we know that there are eligible children, but they were not served. So take a look at areas of any district where there might be we know where there's some misses, and reach out to community areas in those areas, or look at your county council, or just talk to people that can recommend a group that can come together with the purpose of serving our kids. And these people can bring somebody else to the table, but the idea is that there's no hidden agenda. It's something that you want to do to give to the community. And like I mentioned, and Derek, you mentioned as well, is keep that group sustainable. You might have to coordinate it yourself, but that's okay. You need to bring everybody routinely together and bring everybody up to date. One thing we did one year is we had a press conference and we highlighted the affiliations that we had, and all that did was empower these people to grow and find more students and children that we could serve every summer.
That's great, Marla. We had a really interesting question come in, and I think given the really explosive growth you saw in your program between 2012 and 2013, this is a relevant question. We had someone ask that saying, they understand that this program is federally funded on a reimbursement basis, but someone was asking, what about, is there the availability of upfront funding, or if you're having to front the money yourself in anticipation of reimbursement, how did that work for you when you're, 2013, you're serving twice as many meals, and therefore you have a much more significant financial outlay for your program. How did you manage that? How did you manage a potential bottleneck in funding with this program in that summer?
Well, reimbursement is provided after meals are served on a routine basis. So us being a school system, we operate under a budget that is comprised of, all meals that are served and reimbursements in anticipation. So money spent is reimbursed the following month. So we don't look at it as a monthly expense, and when we've run out of money, then we can't spend anymore. It's on a rolling basis based on a month to month and a yearly budget. So it's not looked at that way. Now, a good question would be the anticipated purchasing, but that we always, and I'm sure that other school districts on the phone, we don't purchase to an exact meal. We're always purchasing in advance. So if we're using more product and inventory than we anticipated, our future purchases would reflect the increase in need, if that makes sense to the person asking the question.
Yeah, that's great. And for the individual who wrote that in, feel free to follow up. And Melissa, I know we haven't gotten to you yet. I know you're going to be presenting some slides later, but I feel like as a community-based sponsor, I'm curious whether this may have been a situation you run into, or if your colleagues have considered something like this. If you are seeing a large uptick in service across your program or in specific areas, how you do manage that funding piece, if that has been a challenge at times, or if that's been something that you have a perspective on.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. We operate both the after school and summer meal program. And so you can use those funds back and forth. And so we can utilize our after school funds that we had ending in June to start in June with the summer food program. And that can help cover the gap as you're going along through the summer.
Great, thank you. And we got another question in from someone who was asking specifically about the seamless summer option, but was trying to understand, as a sponsor, is there a requirement that you deliver meals to sites, or if site supervisors or designated staff from that site can actually pick up meals? And Marla, I'd love to, if you have specific examples you can point to, but I do want to let folks know that you obviously need to maintain local and state health and food safety guidelines, but if a site is able to pick up a meal, that is one way that you can arrange this. Obviously, you'd have to work out the details, but there's no requirement that sponsoring staff actually deliver the meals. There may be specific programs that have rules, but there's not a given that the sponsors themselves have to deliver the meals. It's possible for sites to pick up meals as well from a centralized kitchen.
That's a great question. So I'm going to address that question with realizing that our goal is to get meals to kids. And there's sometimes that there are circumstances that prevent us from delivering meals to a location at a time that staff is on location. And so if the site is able to pick up the meals and the meals are prepared and in a cooler with ice so that there's temperature control, that's absolutely fine. There are circumstances where we weren't able to deliver to a location when staff was there at the end of the day, and so we delivered a day ahead. So whatever needs to be thought through and be creative about how to make it work is what we need to do. So there's absolutely, that's a great question, that a site could come to a location and pick up meals. There were times where we were delivering to a location that was in a congested part of a town, and our trucks couldn't pull into the library that was located there, so we delivered to a local school, and the site came to the school to pick up the meals that were in a cooler with ice and then took them to their location at the library. So whatever has to happen to make it available for kids, that's what we need to do. And I'm sure that clearly with your question, that's what you want to do.
That's great. And just to go back on the question of funding up front, I would like to point out, and we got a great comment from someone up in Vermont, that there is the opportunity to request advance funding when you are submitting your application. So if you're a sponsor, you can submit advance funding for your first month's reimbursement. So that comes out of your claiming month when you get the program started. So that is an option to consider. And again, it's one of those things that is managed at the state level, so you want to make sure you're engaging with your administering state agency. But that is an opportunity, something you can connect and explore. We have some additional questions. I want to keep us moving forward in the interest of time, but we have logged those, and we'll have additional time for audience Q&A at the near the end of the webinar. But, you know, Marla, these are some great points you brought up, and just want to highlight some of the key success factors that you have already brought out, which is really, you know, number one, the right people matter. In order for partnerships to translate into impact, you need to align yourself with individuals and organizations that share your mission, can mobilize assets, and are both willing and able to align their efforts with your own, such as what Marla was trying to do when she was trying to expand her program. Additionally, it's really important that these partners can also lend credibility to your efforts among the communities that you seek to serve in order to build trust in the program. Planning does take time, and I know that I've chatted with Melissa and Marla about this, and you know, effective partnership involves many moving pieces, and there can be some bumps along the way. And while you can mitigate some unpleasant surprises through effective planning and communication, it's helpful to be sure to build in additional time for tasks, more perhaps than if you were just handling them on your own. The good news is that by doing this and working with additional partners, you are able to benefit from more resources and credibility than when you're just acting on your own. Follow through is key, right? A great idea is just a great idea until it's put into action. And a good idea is better than a great idea if there's follow through. Keep in mind that the work of partnership is only as successful as the follow through itself. And in order to make sure that those partnerships lead to meaningful outcomes, you have to develop shared expectations. You have to reinforce accountability. And when your partnership group comes up with a great idea to take your program to the next level, the next step really is to assign individual tasks to folks in the room and establish a timeline to have those tasks completed. This, as the organizer, as the sponsor, gives you permission to follow up later on to make sure those tasks were completed, or to identify any trouble spots where more assistance may be needed. And remember, it's important to keep a mindset of learning as you go. And don't let the great become the enemy of the good. You know, you don't have to have a perfect plan, nor do you have to be a perfect planner to bring people together behind your shared goal. Your willingness to engage new partners, expand your work with existing partners, and work together in new ways will lead to more insights. It'll lead to more opportunities than you will have seen before. And so please take these into consideration as some of the success factors that, you know, Marla mentioned that we've seen before. And I also think this is a great time to go ahead and turn over the floor to Melissa Moore of the Family League of Baltimore, who can help us think a little bit more broadly about some of the principles, these principles, and how they're applied at the community level. And also to widen the lens and consider how broad-based partnerships that extend beyond summer meals specifically, they can actually also benefit this program over time. And so, Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. Really glad to have you here today.
Sure, thanks. Afternoon, everybody, and happy Valentine's Day. As Derek said, I'm from the Family League of Baltimore, and we are a local management board. We've been around since 1991, and our job is to mobilize resources, empower communities, and build capacity of organization to provide children and families high-quality programs and sources and services, that help them reach their full potential. If you go to the next slide, you can see our focus areas across the lifespan. And so we fund over 73 community-based organizations to do this work and measure the outcomes. We funded over $13 million to organizations to help in its mission to create lasting outcomes for children and youth, bringing all the right partners to the table, as you said, large and small, to strengthen our impact. In addition to this, and the community-based organizations we fund, we run the summer, after-school, and family childcare programs here in Baltimore City. So in 2012, when we were approached to talk about partnerships and talk about agencies across the city by the mayor to help end childhood hunger in our city, we started the Baltimore Partnership. And on the next slide is kind of like our big dream. Here is our food utopia, where we have our children being able to access meals at recreation centers, WIC, SNAP, summer, school year, all around the city, as you can see. And our mission is to, in the Baltimore Partnership, to increase participation in all the federal nutrition programs to help decrease childhood hunger. And to do that, we had to see who was involved in these programs and bring them to the table. And so If you go to the next slide, you'll see all of the organizations that we have sitting around our tables. And I think collaboration really begins with connections, and the partnership brings together stakeholders from government, public, private sectors, as you can see, and we work with them towards the common goal of helping Baltimore families. We support access to breakfast, lunch, after school, summer, food pantries, backpack programs, WIC, SNAP, and nutrition education. So for summer, we have all of the sponsors at the table, and it allows us to have conversations about successes and challenges. This year, the hot topic was around the waivers, and it was really helpful to be able to troubleshoot with my partners who are going to be going through the same thing to figure out how we could meet the changes to the regulations. We do host quarterly meetings, but a lot of the work happens in between. And some of the wins that we've had from working with these organizations is, for example, with the Maryland Farmers Market. And so partnering with them has allowed us to serve our meals at the farmers market. We usually only do one meal just because of the times that the markets operate, but the farmers market representative who sits at the table then introduced us to all of the supervisors for all the individual markets across the city. And so we're able to connect with them about serving meals at their site, which brings more families to the market, which increases the use of the Maryland market money, and then increases the use of vegetables throughout the week for families across the city. So that is a win-win-win all the way around. The other partnership that's been really meaningful, one of the wins there, is our partnership with Baltimore Housing. So all of our housing complexes and our healthy food priority areas, formerly known as food deserts, have meal sites in them, even if they have to be a mobile van because they don't have a community room or the complex is so big that the community room can't service all of the residents and the children in that space. We work with United Way to have 211 have access to all of our sites all of the time. So anyone that calls in is able to get that information and they can find the closest site to them. And the mayor's office has been a huge partner connecting with the mayor's office of faith and neighborhood liaisons, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Okay, so let's talk about meetings, right? You have to meet. So on our next slide, we have our kids, which are always inspiring. And so we meet quarterly to make sure that we can serve them best because a lot of this stuff happens in between. So in and around January, this time, like Marla said, we're already kind of talking about outreach, talking deliverables, and assigning roles as to what we are going to do. We hold community conversations, which I think have been a key part to our success in increasing meals year over year over year since 2012. And this allows us to go deep into the neighborhoods and talk to them about the summer meal program and where the summer sites are, where they should be, and how they can access them. And so one thing I would really stress is that when you're going into a community, you always go through a community champion. A community champion, every neighborhood has one. You probably have one in your own neighborhood. Mine is Miss Pam. Miss Pam in my neighborhood knows everything about everybody all of the time. And so if I was an outsider, wanted to get into that community, she'd probably be my reference point because from there I could get kind of spiderwebbed off to all other people, all other association meetings, all other faith councils and things like that. And so having her or someone like her introduce you into that community will give you a little bit of clout and a little bit of being able to walk in and tell people who you are and actually have them listen to you. Coming in as a stranger is a little bit more difficult that we've found. The other person that's a good reference for this is the Office of Neighborhoods or the Office of Faith in Neighborhoods as we have in Baltimore City. And so these liaisons usually have different sections or different zip codes around the city. And so talking to them, they're usually able to give you right off their top of their head a few champions that they could reference you to, and then you could speak with them and then go into those neighborhoods and start to do some of your outreach. Let's see here. So a little bit of the outreach that we've done that has come out of some of the partnerships. including partnering with city agencies to put magnets on all of their vehicles. So around the city, whether it's someone who is, driving around checking parking, or a city van that is driving meals from one place to another. We've had them on trash trucks. We've had them on everything. So if you can imagine just this whole, I think we handed out 1,500 magnets. So all of these vehicles driving around the city, giving the information about the summer meal program and who to call to find the site. I think that was a really good partnership. The other one was a billboard campaign that we started with Clear Channel for outreach, and they have all these unused billboards in Baltimore City, which just so happened to be in our target neighborhoods. And so they gave them to us at a very, very, very low rate. And we were able to put information up there with the texting number and the 211 number so that anybody walking or driving by can easily see that information and make sure that they call and find out where the sites were. The good thing about those too is that you can track them. So at the end of the program year, you can contact 211, or you can contact and get the information about the texting number for your area. Like I said, we have increased meals over each year. And so with that, you have to have a celebration. And so we always have a end of the year celebration at City Hall. We call it an end of the year celebration, even though it's in October. The summer technically ends in August here, but we don't get the data until October, and we want to be able to make sure to talk a little bit of numbers. So we have that celebration at City Hall. We invite all of our community champions that we've spoken with over the course of the year. We invite all of our city council members and our site supervisors, and all of the partners that are in the partnership to the work, and we're able to share new things and innovative ideas that we saw to completion that year, share stories about the summer meal program and how great it is for kids. And it really gives everybody that opportunity to take a deep breath and know that it's over, but that it was successful. And it kind of shows the importance of having all the partners around the table, if that makes sense. On the next slide, we have the advocacy and public policy piece of the partnership. The partnership also has an advocacy arm, which is really important to the work because most things that pertain to food assistance or breaking down barriers with food start with a policy in local, state, or federal government. I really won't go too much into policy on this call. I think it's a whole separate webinar, but we do have a policy person on Family League staff that can give some information about that if anyone is interested about some of the things that we've been able to implement here. I think one of the most important things, though, as we talk about partnership, is making sure that our city council members are aware of the program, that they're able to be invited to do site visits at the locations where we're serving meals, and that we're able to kind of get in front of them and tell them all about it. So we've been invited every year in around June to speak to the delegation about the summer meals program and how they can share information with their constituents, also how they can access different material for outreach, whether it's posters or yard signs and stuff like that. And then we get the information in each one of their newsletters, so that way when the president's newsletter come out, it has all the information about summer at the perfect time when parents might be looking for ways to access meals during the summer.
That's great, Melissa. Thank you so much. And one thing I really appreciate about what you said is the importance of recognizing partners, because I can imagine that that's a great way to make sure folks stay with you and keep at it, right? Over time, is to feel recognized.
Oh gosh, yeah. And it really isn't always easy. Like I said, the partnership started in 2012. And we've seen little wins each and every year, and we've gotten new ideas and brought new people to the table. And I think it's important to celebrate that, and celebrating it with an event at City Hall. We invite the mayor. We're all able to hear stories from site supervisors about their kids and things like that. It just it brings it all together.
That's great. And I want to follow up on some of what I think you alluded to and we had talked about earlier. I know we had talked about how sometimes it takes a little longer for these partnerships to materialize or to gain steam than you might like, especially when you have, an urgent goal in mind. Can you talk about why you continue and you and your partners in Baltimore continue to make the work of partnership such a priority in spite of any setbacks that might arise or frustrations or delays? Why is partnership such an integral piece to what you're doing in Baltimore?
Yeah, I think it all just comes back to the kids, and that's why I like to use them in my slides. Is we're doing it for them and making sure that we come together no matter what issues arise, whether it be personalities or mission creep or I don't know, willingness to do the work. Is if you bring it back to that piece about childhood hunger and making sure that we have access to meals, the need in Baltimore is so great. We can't afford to not make this work.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, thank you so much. And its audience, from those in our audience, please feel free to chat any questions. I know we're getting some in now, but please continue to write those in. I wanted to put a question out to you, Melissa, and then also Marla. Thank you for staying on the line with us. I'd love to get both of your thoughts on, as we've talked about partnership and thought about some of the key success factors and things to keep in mind and the importance of recognition and celebration. In each of your programs, what are the areas that you consider to be missed opportunities for partnership or collaboration that maybe it took you a while to realize or take advantage of with regard to summer meals? What are some things that maybe were kind of under your noses that it kind of took a while before it dawned on you or one of your partners that, oh, this is an opportunity, this is someone we can work with?
I can touch that. One of the things that's very, very important, and it happens later in the year, later in the school year, is making sure that families are aware of any programs that might be happening. So it's our partnership with all of the schools and the school administrators and making sure that they communicate to families where there might be programs or walk-in locations or open sites that kids that are going to be around can access during the summer. And we've created, didn't always do this, but created flyers or used the county's Connect Ed system, the robocalling, before the end of the school year to make sure that we're communicating. And it was a couple of years, it was like, oh, yeah, we should have done that. And when we did do that, we saw a much higher participation rate in the local community program. So that's a biggie.
That's great, Marla. Thank you. We had a question that came in, and I think either of you, Melissa or Marla, may be able to speak to this as program sponsors who have taken on sites affiliated and possibly unaffiliated. We got a question here. We're a charter school with students in 2 different sites, and they want to apply to get summer meals, and they'd like to get meals delivered to sites for their students. And they have about 200 students at each site that will need breakfast and lunch. So one thing I want to say, is that if you're interested to be a site, then you want to identify a potential sponsor in your area, someone who's already running this program that might be able to take you on. One way to do that is to reach out to your administering state agency who is aware of sponsors that are active in your area. That's the first step, I would say, is that the Department of Education or Agriculture, the state agency that administers the program, may be able to help connect the dots. But since we've got 2 sponsors on the line, I'd love to get your perspectives, Melissa and or Marla, of if you have someone come to you that wants to become a site, how do you work with those individuals, and what do you see as next steps to be able to make those connections?
Melissa, you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, I'm still learning how to use my mute button. That's why I'm so late. So the first thing that we do is, we just double check the address and make sure it's in our specific area. We have a number of sponsors across the city, and as I said, we all work in partnership, and so there are certain things that we will pass on to someone else if it's not in our general wheelhouse. And so we would check that to make sure that they would be for us. If not, we would send them to the other sponsor. And the other thing is we would make sure that they were eligible for the program. After that, we would go ahead and send out an application via email, fax, or snail mail, depending on what works best. We would and then sign them up to attend a training. So that way, as soon as we get the application back, or if they do bring it to training, they would participate in our training. We would do a pre-operational visit, and that would occur before the first day of their program. And after that, if all goes well, then they'll just be waiting for a delivery on their first day, and they'll start with the meal program.
I'm signing myself up with you, Melissa. Very much the same. We would, the only difference, since we are the sponsor, would be to have a conversation with the site to determine the best model to use, whether it would be a hot meal program, whether it would be a bag meal program. So it would really be to understand what the site looks like and how we could best serve that program.
Great. And again, it's great to have two sponsors on the line who can really give some insider knowledge into, like, if you're a site coming to a sponsor, these are some of the questions that may be a part of the conversation to be able to get onto the program. We had a great question that came in about working with parents and families to get children to sites. Sounds like we have a sponsor who was delivering food to housing authorities and had a hard time getting kids and families to the congregate location. And Marla, I know you were talking about that earlier and how you were working to have a community center location. Love to hear you talk about that. And Melissa, I've been to some of your sites in Baltimore, and I know that at some of the housing facilities, there may not always be a great congregate space, and there can be some challenges. Could one or both of you talk to kind of how you address those issues of whether it's community trust or having a viable location for kids to eat in a congregate setting, how you've addressed that?
I can start with the answer to that. That's a great question, and that's a struggle. So in Montgomery County, which has a lot of walking areas and a lot of non-walking areas, we realized at one point that all kids weren't signed up to some type of program. So how do we feed those kids? And we created walk-in locations, which were designated areas throughout the county that kids could just come to get a meal. Well, transportation was a problem. And so we thought, okay, we will try working with our transportation folks that were awesome. And we created a bus loop that would ride in an area and drop off and pick up children throughout the meal time from 10:30 to 1:30. And honestly, that didn't really work because of a lot of reasons that I'm sure that the listeners on this call will understand. So then we created the mobile locations that we go to, and I know that the next webinar will talk more about the mobile locations, but it ties directly into partnerships. And in order to make the mobile locations successful, we partnered with our Department of Recreation so that based on an individual need. But that's an excellent question and a real problem.
That's great. Thanks, Marla. Melissa, would you have anything to add to that based on serving communities and public housing facilities?
Yeah, so we did have this issue where a number of kids weren't coming to a specific site, specifically because they weren't allowed to go past a specific street in the complex. And so we had to add another site, and that just came directly from community input, like Marla said. I think, the other thing is to being able to know the problem, and if that's the problem that the specific sponsor is having, they could also, just ask for transportation. So could they go and try and get some transportation vouchers for the specific families, or if they can't make a new site over there, could they be able to figure out another way, much like Marla did, to try and find a solution to the problem. So that's really interesting.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And, you know, Marla, to go back to what you were mentioning, I think as both of you were discussing some of these potential solutions, it's, you know, there's a range of potential tools in our toolbox, right, of transportation and outreach and engaging the faith community or elected leaders. But really at the root of that, to be able to make those tactics move, we really have to have partnerships in place to be able to marshal the resources that are needed to really put those plans into action. And so I just want to thank both of you, for, you know, sharing of your experience and being willing to answer some of the great questions that we've that have come in today. And also I want to just say to those of you who are on the line listening in, when it comes to getting the right folks to the table and making the most of your time together and your efforts to expand summer meals, you don't have to start from scratch. We put together here at No Kid Hungry a number of resources to assist you and to help you be successful in this work. We've listed a few here. There are even more on our website, which I would encourage you to visit. We have a guide on engaging key stakeholders, which provides a list of key partners to include in your collaborative and some guiding questions to help identify who else might need to be at the table. We have a meeting agenda template. It can help guide a conversation with partners that are brought together to develop a vision for success and to make tangible progress toward goals. And we have a facilitator guide and a planning tip sheet that are essentially addenda to that planning agenda template so that you have all the resources that you need to go into those meetings confidently and also to save you time as you're getting that together. We know that folks on the line are busy people, and the goal of these resources is to be able to help you save some time and to move forward more quickly and more efficiently with this work. We have some strategies for sponsor retention. Those of you who are community-based organizations or anti-hunger advocates, maybe not sponsoring programs, but working with sponsors, this provides a timeline to help you support and retain some of those strong summer meal sponsors in your area. And that's going to include partnership and being able to leverage additional resources so that those folks have the assets and the support that they need to be successful in the community. And I know we got to a lot of the questions, but again, as Emily said, those that we didn't have time to get to today, we will follow up with you directly. And if you have additional questions in the hours and the days ahead, please contact us at bestpractices@strength.org and know that we are here to support you. I want to thank Marla Kaplan and Melissa Moore for joining us today as featured panelists. Thank you guys, each of you, for sharing so much of your expertise and the knowledge to help us with today's topic. I want to note that a recording and a slide deck from today's webinar are forthcoming. And someone had mentioned about a question about the rescission, the summer meals rescission. I know that's a hot topic. We released a statement in follow-up to last month's webinar. I'm happy to say that there is now a recorded webinar that walks through the anticipated impact of the rescission, outlines the memos that were affected, and next steps for both state agencies and sponsors to submit waiver requests to USDA to extend program flexibilities. A link to that webinar will be included in the follow-up to today's event. In the meantime, please make plans to join us next month for our webinar on program innovation to expand access to summer meals in hard-to-reach communities. And this really gets at some of the questions that we received and didn't have time to get to about challenges that are unique to rural communities. In next month's webinar, attendees will learn about new creative approaches that can help expand access to summer meals in highly rural areas that are allowable under current regulations. Whether it's bringing meals directly to where kids like to hang out or changing a menu to align with mainstream models, sponsors who attend next month's webinar will leave with a new idea to test and the inspiration needed for a successful summer. Registration information for that webinar will also be included in the follow-up for today's event, but please go ahead and mark it on your calendar for Thursday, March 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And I'm happy to report that that webinar will be hosted by my colleague, Kirsten Kraft, who is the Manager for Program Innovation here with No Kid Hungry. So I want to say thanks to everyone who attended today. Emily, thank you for organizing and managing today's event. Melissa and Marla, thank you for your work and for your expertise as panelists. And for those of you on the line, thanks again for joining us, and please plan to call in next month as well. Have a great day.